This is the Ensemble Theatre, and it's no regular theatre. Its artistic director does things a little differently. Let's find out why.
In terms of what theatre does in Australia and how theatres are run in Australia, probably far and away the most radical thing is that we survive pretty much entirely on the box office. It's something like 97% of our incomes from the box office, and we don't get any government funding. We don't ask for any government funding. We get very little sponsorship, just a small amount that we look on as icing on the cake.
What's amazing about Sandra and different about Sandra is that she fills that theatre with no government funding, and every other theatre company, major theatre company in Australia, receives millions of dollars from the government or from corporate sponsorship, and they cannot make it work without that funding. Sandra has managed to make it work with no funding whatsoever, just revenue from the box office.
Of course, one of the things about not getting government funding and very little sponsorship, and when you are entirely dependent on the box office, one of the hardest things is to run a theatre that only has 216 seats. So how do we make it happen? How do we make it work? Well, what we do is we double up and triple up on plays. Have to do plays that people actually want to see. I know that sounds probably fairly radical. Why on earth would you choose plays that people actually want to see? Well, probably because I can't think of a hugely good reason to do plays that people don't want to see. What is the point?
Her programming is her greatest talent. She chooses the best of the latest plays from Broadway and London, and then she chooses the best of what's available here in Australia from the latest and greatest Australian playwrights. And she also chooses really challenging and stimulating works that make you think when you leave the theatre.
When I'm choosing the plays, I try to do plays that are going to make a difference to people. So I think the choosing of the plays is very important. When I'm trying to choose the plays, I try to put myself not as an older woman, but if I were a 17-year-old boy, what would I like to see? And I know I want to see plays where I care about at least one of the characters. I want to go on a journey. I want a thoroughly good yarn, and I want to laugh and I want to cry. That sounds a bit like a formula. It's not, because it actually extends to all theatre. And I want to be inspired, and there's something about inspirational theatre that is pretty exciting.
When Sandra was nominated for a medal in the Order of Australia a few years ago, John Mistow, one of our greatest Australian playwrights, wrote this about her. Sandra Bates, the artistic director of Sydney's Ensemble Theatre, is old-fashioned, unpopular and completely out of touch with trends in modern theatre. Her contribution to the cultural life of this state is immeasurable. Through her integrity, her risk-taking and sheer willpower, she has provided employment for literally thousands of actors, writers, directors and designers whose work would not otherwise have been seen. While other theatre companies cry poor and demand increasing levels of government financing, Sandra refuses to accept funding. Instead, she insists that art can only be honest if it's independent. Amazingly, she makes her theatre run at a profit. In doing so, she has broken every rule of modern theatre.
Sandra Bates breaks rules every day, and she does it for the community.